Today I am going to show you how to block your granny squares. Blocking is essentially wetting your project and then pinning it down in a fixed position in order to let it dry to make the shape as desired. So not everyone does this for every project, and if you can't be bothered, you don't have time, or maybe your project just doesn't need it, maybe your stitches are super neat and tidy and your tension's perfect, then maybe blocking isn't for you. But as an example, here are two granny squares that I made a tutorial for previously, and I will post a little link for that if it's something you feel like making for yourself. But here we have a granny square which hasn't been blocked, and you can see the edges are wobbly, the corners kind of bend in a little bit, and it's just not as uniform as this one here. So this one here has been blocked, and you can see it's much more square. It's going to be much easier to join several of these in a larger project because your edges are all going to be nice and flat. So let's get started. So one of the first things you're going to need is some water. What I'm going to be doing today is submerging my granny square in this water. Now there are different techniques for this. Maybe you've got a very large piece of work and you don't have a bowl or a bucket big enough. You can spray the water onto your project. Also, if you don't want to leave it to dry for a very long time, spraying is a good option. Maybe it doesn't need too much shaping and it just needs that little kind of pull to keep things as intended. You can also use a steamer. However, you need to be careful that your yarn allows for the heat and is okay with that. And one thing you must never do is iron your work. What that will do is it will flatten your stitches. You will lose the definition, and if you're using anything with any kind of acrylic in it, you could end up melting your stitches. So I use cold water. I find it's the easiest way, most unoffensive way, least likely to cause any damage. So I've got a bowl of water here, and I'm just going to place my granny square in. So I'm going to submerge it for a length of time until the yarn is completely saturated. Now this will vary depending on your project. If your project is a lot larger, this will take a lot longer to soak in. But for just a granny square, I tend to leave it for about 20 minutes to an hour, and that should be more than enough time for the water to soak into the yarn's fibres and allow it to be nice and malleable for you. So I'm going to leave this here, and then I will be coming back in 20 minutes where we can start to shape our project. So my granny square has soaked for a good while now and it's fully saturated, which means I can begin pinning it to our board. So I'll just move this out of the way. For your board, you have a bunch of different options. Now there are special boards that you can use for this, and I'll post a link in the description down below of some options for things that you can use. You can use any kind of foam board, something that will hold a pin and keep it in place. You don't need to spend a lot of money on this, in my opinion. I'm using some cork placemats that I've literally just got from IKEA. You could buy like a pack of 4 of them, and I find these work really well. We are also going to be using some pins to hold our project in place. One thing that you need to be careful with your pins is you want them to be made from something that will not rust. So if you have a set of pins and you want to maybe do a little test before you go and use them for a project, it might be a good idea. You don't want your pins to rust and leave any stains on your work. So you're going to need a fair few of these as you want to be able to keep everything nice and taut. So here we have our square. And what I'm going to do is take it out of the water. Might give it a little squeeze just to get rid of some of that excess, but you don't want to do this hard at all. You don't want to be doing any actions that could change the shape of your work. You don't want to be squishing your stitches. So drain that off and placing it on to your cork or whatever pinboard you have handy. So what I'm going to do is start with my corners. You want to put your pin in and pull it nice and taut. And imagine you're trying to achieve a kind of a straight edge with your work. Now you might have to pull these pins out and reposition them as you go around, but that's fine. Just keep working until you are happy with how your project sits. I'm then going to start putting my pins into each hole around the edge. So each one of these gaps, essentially you just want enough pins in your project to keep each section nice and taut. Now you can get boards with lines on them that will show you if you're creating a straight edge or not, and these are really handy if your project requires you to be quite particular about this. But I generally find, for the purpose of kind of everyday projects, maybe just something you're making for yourself, it's not necessarily always needed, and it's good to be able to use things that you have around the house. I've even seen people use a rolled up towel and pin their projects on that as well. Now, if you don't have any pins to hand, it's not the end of the world. One thing that I find works actually fairly well is a needle with a piece of blue tack on the end. I know it's a bit DIY, I know it's not something that's ideal for your project, but if maybe you're missing one and you just need that extra one to fill a gap, it's a good option for that. So this is my project, nice and pinned, and what I'm going to do now is leave this somewhere warm to dry, and I'm going to let it air dry naturally, as I find that's best for the fibres, doesn't cause any flattening, doesn't cause any shrinkage when applying heat, and that's essentially what I'm going to do. Probably will take about 24 hours. I live in the UK, pretty chilly right now, but you might get lucky and live somewhere warm. If you ended up using this tutorial and finding it helpful, then please leave a little like and subscribe. That would really help me out. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.